They say the dead tell no tales, but they are wrong. The dead never stop talking. It is the living who refuse to listen. I woke up in a gutter. Baltimore, October. The rain tasted like iron and cheap whiskey. I looked down at my body, but the clothes, they weren't mine. Cheap wool, ill-fitting. The costume of a clown draped over a corpse. I tried to stand, but the city spun, a carousel of gas lights and shadows. I called out for a name, Reynolds. I don't know who he is, a friend, an enemy, or just a phantom my mind conjured to explain the knife in my back. They tell me I died 4 days later, Sunday, October 7th, 1849. Phrenitis, the doctors called it, congestion of the brain, a polite way of saying I lost the war against my own mind. But I didn't die of a fever. I died of a broken heart, and a world that had no place for a dreamer who walked in the dark. Let me take you back. Let me show you the evidence. September 27th. I left Richmond on a steamboat heading north. I was sober, happy even. I'd just gotten engaged to Sarah Elmira Royster, my childhood sweetheart. After all the darkness, there was finally light at the end of the tunnel. I had $80 in my pocket and a lecture tour ahead of me. Then, nothing. 6 days of silence, a gap in the record like a page torn from a book. October 3rd. A printer named Joseph Walker found me outside Ryan's 4th Ward polls, a tavern-turned-polling place. I was delirious, incoherent, dressed in someone else's shabby suit and a cheap palm leaf hat. My own clothes, fine ones worth something, were gone. What happened in those 6 days? That's the locked room mystery. And like Dupin, I've analyzed every clue. Theory 1, cooping. Baltimore in 1849 was a cesspool of political corruption. Election day was coming, and the gangs needed bodies. They'd kidnap drifters, drunks, anyone vulnerable, hold them in a room, a coop, and force them to vote. Multiple times, different polling places. They'd beat you if you resisted, change your clothes so you wouldn't be recognized, ply you with whiskey to keep you compliant. Ryan's 4th Ward polls. That's where they found me, on election day, in someone else's clothes. The evidence fits. But the evidence also lies. Theory 2, the bottle. I'd been sober for months, sworn off the demon, but sobriety is a tightrope walk over an abyss, and I'd fallen before. Had I fallen again? Did I simply drink myself into oblivion in some Baltimore gutter, trading my fine clothes for liquor, and end up a casualty of my own weakness? It's what they wanted to believe. The literary circles, the critics who called me mad. It was easier to dismiss me as a drunk than to admit I'd been murdered by this city's cruelty. Theory 3, rabies. Years later, a doctor would examine my symptoms, the hydrophobia, the delirium, the confusion, the refusal of water in my final hours. Classic rabies, he said, perhaps a dog bite during those missing days, a death sentence that took a week to execute. But I prefer the poetry of the first 2 theories. Rabies is just bad luck, and I never believed in luck. I believed in consequence. Every detective looks for a motive. You want to know what killed me? Don't look at the bottle. The bottle was just the medicine. The disease was loss. I called it the Red Death in my stories. A masked figure that crashes the party and leaves silence in its wake. But in my life, It had a name: tuberculosis. It is a cruel investigator, that disease. It stalks you. It took my mother before I could learn her face. I was 3 years old, and I watched her cough blood into a handkerchief. Eliza Poe, an actress. Beautiful, they said. I don't remember. It took my foster mother, Frances Allen, the only woman who ever held me like I was wanted. And it took Virginia, my sweet, fragile Virginia, my cousin, my wife, my child bride. I married her when she was 13. Don't look at me like that. It was different then. She was my family, the only family I had left. I watched her bleed to death while singing. January 30th, 1847. A blood vessel ruptured in her throat while she was at the piano, her voice cracking like delicate glass. She lingered for 2 more years, dying slowly, coughing up her life one crimson drop at a time. We had no money for medicine, no money for coal to heat the cottage. I held her in my arms, and my mother-in-law, Maria Clem, wrapped Virginia in my old military coat and laid a tortoiseshell cat across her chest for warmth. She was 24 when she died. People asked why I wrote such grim tales, why my women were always dying, why my houses were always crumbling, why the narrators were always burying someone alive or watching them waste away. They didn't understand. I wasn't writing fiction. I was writing police reports on the crimes committed against my soul. Let me show you the case files. Case File 1, The Telltale Heart. A murderer kills an old man because he can't stand the man's vulture eye. He buries the body beneath the floorboards, but he can still hear the heartbeat, thump, 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 growing louder, driving him mad until he confesses. The critics said it was about guilt. They were half right. It was about the things you bury that refuse to stay buried. Every loss, every failure, every moment I let someone down. You can hide them under the floorboards of your mind, but they keep beating. Case File 2, The Cask of Amontillado. Montresor lures his enemy into the catacombs with the promise of rare wine. Then he walls him up alive, brick by brick. The man screams, begs, laughs in denial, but the wall goes up anyway, and Montresor walks away, leaving him to die in the dark. The critics said it was about revenge. It was about being buried alive by circumstance, by poverty, by a world that promised me wine and gave me a tomb. Case File 3, The Fall of the House of Usher. Roderick Usher lives in a crumbling mansion with his dying twin sister, Madeline. When she dies, he buries her in the family vault. But she wasn't dead, just catatonic. She claws her way out of the coffin and comes back for him. They die together, and the house collapses into the tarn. I wrote that after Virginia's first hemorrhage. I knew she was dying, and I knew I would die with her. We were twins, bound by blood and sorrow. When she fell, the house of Poe would fall too. I was right. To fight the chaos, I invented logic. I created C. Auguste Dupin, the first detective, a man who could look at a locked room and see the key. The murders in the Rue Morgue. A woman and her daughter are found butchered in a locked room. No way in, no way out. The police are baffled, but Dupin examines the evidence, the strange voice, the tuft of hair, the superhuman strength. An orangutan. The killer was an orangutan, escaped from a sailor. I wanted to believe that the world made sense, that if you just looked closely enough, if you analyzed the blood spatter, the broken window, the orangutan's hair, you could solve the mystery, you could fix the broken thing. But that was my greatest fiction. Dupin could solve anything. But me? I couldn't solve the mystery of how to pay the rent. I couldn't solve the mystery of why the public loved the raven but let the poet starve. I gave them logic. They gave me poverty. I gave them a poem about a man haunted by a bird that croaks one word, nevermore. It made me famous. For a week, I was invited to salons. People quoted it at parties, and I was paid $9. $9 for the most famous poem in America. I died broke, 40 years old and broke, begging editors for advance payments, writing flattering reviews I didn't believe in just to earn a few coins. The father of the detective story couldn't even detect where his next meal was coming from. There is a demon that lives in all of us. I called it the Imp of the Perverse. It is that voice that stands on the edge of the cliff and whispers, "Jump." Not because you want to die, but because the choice itself is irresistible. The forbidden thing, the self-destructive urge that defies all logic and reason. I spent 40 years fighting that imp. Sometimes I won. Mostly, I drank. And in that final week in Baltimore, I think the imp finally took the wheel. Did I drink myself to death? Did the political gangs beat me for a vote? Did rabies claim me? Or did I simply decide that the story had gone on long enough, that the detective had gathered enough evidence and it was time to close the case? The verdict is open, the case is cold, but the words remain. They buried me in an unmarked grave. No headstone, no ceremony, just a coffin and dirt. My cousin Nielsen Poe, no relation to me in spirit, paid for it. Maria Clem, my mother-in-law, my muddy, wasn't even there. She couldn't afford the trip. But 26 years later, they moved me, gave me a monument. School children raised the money, pennies and dimes from kids who read my stories and wanted to give me what the literary world never did, recognition. Every January 19th, my birthday, a mysterious figure in black visits my grave, leaves 3 roses and a bottle of cognac. The Poe toaster, they call him. No one knows who he is. Maybe it's Dupin, still solving mysteries, still leaving clues. I am Edgar Allan Poe. I died in another man's clothes, in a city of strangers, with a name on my lips that no one could explain. But if you are listening to this, then perhaps I am not dead after all. The stories outlived the man. The detective outlived the corpse. Step into the shadows with me. The case is just beginning. And remember, nevermore is not an ending, it is a promise.